Hi, we're going to go through country by country in the second half of the 19th century, just so you can get a timeline overview of each country and the events within that country. Looking at France, just to remind you that we left off in France with the revolutions of 1848, which started with the Socialist Revolution of Louis Blanc and then moved on to the Bloody June Days, which was a reaction against that socialism, where France ended up reestablishing a republic, so that's the Second French Republic, under the leadership of Louis Napoleon, President Louis Napoleon. This was a government with a constitution, universal suffrage. He tried to get conservative support, even though he has this liberal government with universal suffrage, by doing a couple of laws to maintain his support amongst the upper class. One of them is known as the Fallot Law, which gave control of education to the Catholic Church, which helped conservative supporters like the government. He also disenfranchised many of the poor people, so that the more radical elements of a republic would be moderated, and jailed a lot of democratic and socialist leaders. So people pushing for the return of a socialist system like we saw under Louis Blanc were put into jail. If you look at once Napoleon III becomes emperor, this technically was a coup d'etat. He became emperor the following year, and it's really a combination of using nationalism and authoritarianism. We saw that already with jailing a lot of democratic socialist leaders. So he took over the government by force and then restored universal suffrage in 1852, and the population at a 92% rate voted to make him president for the next 10 years. The next year, he did a second vote, this plebiscite yes no type vote, and 97% of voters agreed to make him hereditary emperor. So we see at the beginning of his reign, he started out as president, really trying to maintain the support of conservatives. He is able to get that, and is becomes emperor. And he really, in some ways, he shifts his control while he's emperor. It's kind of an interesting mix. He really plays in on nationalism. The Arc de Triomphe, which was started by Napoleon celebrating his victories in Europe, was finished during Napoleon III's reign. He builds this, this is the mausoleum of Napoleon, so it's in the military church in Paris called Les Invalides. So he had Napoleon's body brought back to France. The first part of his reign as emperor, Napoleon III does quite a few liberal reforms, but he is doing them by his own choices. So are they liberal or are they conservative? It's kind of a mixture, because the end result are these liberal reforms, but the process of getting them is done in more conservative kind of ways, where it's just dictated by the emperor. So he encouraged investment by banks using things like credit mobilier, supporting railroads, building public works, rebuilding Paris. And this is really the first time that we see a state playing such a direct role in stimulating the economy. It was a really great success, but he also helped urban workers. So the things on the left-hand side help the middle class, and on the right-hand side, he's also regulating pawn shops, getting better housing for workers outside of the city. They are also given the right to strike and to form unions. So we have at the beginning a pretty liberal empire. He does some political changes as well, restoring universal male suffrage, but only he chooses the minister. Anyone can vote, but the list of candidates that are approved to run for office are influenced by Napoleon III. He does ease some censorship. At the same time, he returns education to government control, and that's not an anti-church thing or a pro-liberal thing. That's a pro-government thing, really trying to assert government control over education. The papal response to that was known as the Syllabus of Errors. Pope Pius IX saw throughout Europe a whole host of nationalist policies going on, including the education changes within France, and believed they were really terrible and detrimental to society, and he abhorred these changes and wrote the Syllabus of Errors, basically like a list of here's all the things people are doing wrong throughout Europe. Liberalism and nationalism were on that list. Why was Napoleon III making these liberal changes? Part of it is that he is just kind of a disaster in the foreign policy area of things. And this helps distract from some of those foreign policy disasters. So let me give you some historical anchors for that. Um, in 1848, with the revolutions of 1848, the Pope was overthrown and a Roman Republic was established. Napoleon III, in order to, back when he was president, in order to gain the support of conservatives, sent French troops to the Papal States, that area in Rome, in order to put down the revolt and gain the conservative support. But the French troops kind of got stuck managing the Papal States. It was very expensive for France to be able to do. We're going to add into this that there was an attempt to take over Indochina in 1864 and 67, and these were very difficult fights. They underestimated the Vietnamese and the Laotians and the Cambodians. It was not nearly as easy as they had anticipated that it would be. So that kind of takes us through Napoleon III during his empire. We know that he had also Paris rebuilt in order to prevent reforms. And that leads us to the Franco-Prussian War. And we'll go into the nuts and bolts in that more in the Germany section. But just to know that the Franco-Prussian War signaled the end of um, the Second Empire when Napoleon III was captured in this battle. Another thing this led to was a siege of Paris by the Prussians in 1870 and a new government forming the Third French Republic. Okay. So here we have some pictures from the Siege of Paris, people eating rats and cats and dogs. Napoleon defeated, sitting here with Otto von Bismarck. He's not crying in this picture, but I bet if he was in a German school textbook, they would talk about him crying. The Third Republic was led by this man, Adolphe Thiers, who you can see from this cartoon here, this idea that he's charging, but he's riding on a snail, shows that there were people were critical of his administrative abilities as a chief executive. The city of Paris, in particular, was very upset with the conditions of the treaty, with the huge indemnity payments and the loss of Alsace-Lorraine. And they saw Thiers as too conservative, too royalist, embarrassing to the national spirit. And so the people, some of the working class people within Paris rose up, refused to accept the Republican government, and said that they were forming their own government, this commune. And this was basically a civil war between the working class in Paris and this brand new government. So they set up barricades. Women were part of this as well as men, working class women. So we have that continued trend of women radicals within France. Much of the city caught on fire. Here's what they really wanted if you look at what they were hoping to have in their new government. They wanted more trade unions and workers, cooperatives to take over factories not in use. So they are looking for jobs, unemployment exchanges, basic secular elementary education, and day nurseries so women would be able to go out and work and have a safe and secure childcare area. Some people call this the first communist revolution. It failed, but the first attempted communist revolution. It does serve as a later inspiration for Lenin in Russia developing that communist revolution. The communards executed federal generals. Here's a picture of a wall that they have carved these generals into, and here's Liberty, who is protecting these generals. Um, the communards were unsuccessful, and the Third Republic was established. It was a Chamber of Deputies, had most of the power, elected by universal suffrage with a weak president. One of the major reforms of the Third Republic was the development of universal or expanding secular education, tax supported public schools, and required education. This government was not particularly popular, though, throughout. There were all kinds of crises with, people in the military trying to take over. The Boulanger crisis was one of those. Like, it was basically like Napoleon trying to take over, but he didn't have Napoleon's charisma. This actually ended up helping the government because being able to put down a revolt made people feel a little bit safer with their government. And this is leading up to about 1890. This was really shook in 1894 with the Dreyfus Affair. This was the idea that someone was spying for Germany, and this counterintelligence officer, Alfred Dreyfus, was accused and tried and convicted of the crime, even though the evidence pointed to somebody else. There was among liberals an outcry against the government. They saw the Catholic Church, which was very supportive of conservatism and the military, as plotting against Dreyfus because he was Jewish. Emile Zola, our famous realist writer, wrote J'accuse, an open letter criticizing the government. So this is, again, the equivalent of like tweeting at him rather than sending him a text, accusing the government of corruption. There was This was a hugely divisive issue within France. Was he seen as this traitor, this terrible person who wasn't even French because he was Jewish? So we see some underlying anti-Semitism within that nationalist, we are this way, and that Jewish people could not be considered part of that. And so we really see this anti-Dreyfusards, the monarchists and the clerics, against the Dreyfusards, who are more moderate Republicans and socialists. So it's like a culture war within France. That was part of this. The government almost toppled, but what they did instead is the French government decided that in order to re-establish its support of the people, they completely turned away from the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church was seen as being so very insistent in France upon supporting the military and not questioning the military, and anyone who questions the military is not someone who loves the country. And so in order to save itself, the French government cut ties with the Catholic Church. One of the things this did was expanded public education in France even further because it was now paid for, and they stopped supporting Catholic Church schools financially at all. And so we see even more patriotism being developed within the public school system within France. One of the other ways the government in France came back from or tried to heal itself after the Dreyfus Affair was by expanding territory in West Africa. This helped increase national feeling and national pride, and to help assuage some of the pain that Frenchmen had felt at first, the humiliation of defeats in the Franco-Prussian War, and then again with the Dreyfus Affair. We'll get to the parts where Europe takes over the rest of the world for nationalist spirit and economic motivations in another module, though.